Am I allowed to use that one?
Hi everyone, this is Alex Epstein. We are in New York City, one of the greatest industrial achievements in the history of industrial civilization. Unfortunately, people who think industrial civilization is immoral are taking advantage of the attention that a great city like New York has and using it to destroy the lifeblood of New York City, which is fossil fuel energy. So we are here to discuss that with them and hopefully get some of them to turn around and maybe carry an I love fossil fuels sign.
That's an odd thing to climate march.
Well, actually, fossil fuels make us a lot safer from the climate.
Wow.
Well, so in the last 80 years, we have 50 times fewer climate-related deaths since people can actually deal with heat and cold and all sorts of other climate-related problems.
Okay, climate-related as in heat and cold, problems like that.
Storms, everything from floods. We're safer from all of those things because we have modern civilization, and half the world doesn't have that. These fuels are far cheaper, more plentiful, more reliable than anything else. They're essential to billions of people's lives. And you're saying on the basis of a failed experiment of the last 100 years, you want to risk all of that.
Well, you love my solar system.
Okay, that's fine. I'm happy to have you have it, but I want to be free. And by the way, it's less than 7% of Germany is solar and wind combined. We're still looking for the scientists. We thought we had a lead, but right now it's like Bigfoot. But I mean, so there are about 3 billion people in the world with almost no electricity. In the last couple decades, by using coal and oil and gas, people have gotten a lot more electricity. So I would like to see that continue, but this rally is saying that should be reversed.
Well, I don't think that's true.
Well, they want to ban 80% of coal use.
Right. And
Nobody seems to be teaching, so we're going to see if we can learn something even over all of the cacophony.
Right. So I was really tempted to take that one, but then I realized I have this screen here, so I'd feel pretty cool though, sitting in the musician's chair. So the context of that whole thing was what was called the People's Climate March, which was this event in New York. Was it 2 weekends ago or so? Maybe even a little bit. I guess a week and a half ago. And something like the numbers are hard to know exactly, but something like 300,000 people descended upon New York City to oppose fossil fuels. And to my knowledge, one person was there holding up an I love fossil fuel sign, which is me. So that's not self-praise. I think it raises sort of two interesting questions. One, why was I there? I'm a kid from the DC area, which is not exactly a coal hotbed or a coal supporting hotbed. And why wasn't anyone else there? That's maybe even the more interesting question. Why wasn't the industry there? Why weren't there any CEOs in the street with me saying, hey, what we do is good? This was a nationally publicized event. It was in advance of a UN climate summit where coal is a prime target. And there were no representatives of the industry and not even really too many in the media. So I think it's an important question to sort of think about. What motivates people to really stand up for themselves? And then I think it's really connected to the issue which comes up all the time, which is what is effective messaging? So what I'm going to tell you today, the ideas I'm going to talk about today, are not something that I just sort of came up with as a PR guy. I'm not a PR guy. My training is in philosophy. What I'm going to tell you are the ideas that convinced me to go from not interested in energy at all to probably the most outspoken champion of fossil fuels in the world, and that I think more importantly have convinced many other people to the point where I get letters every single week from someone who says, you changed the way I think about fossil fuels. And I don't think too many companies and associations get that. And I'm going to explain the reason why. And I'm just going to tell you in advance, it's not my charming personality. There's one big mistake that the industry makes, and I think one big solution to that. So I'm going to start off with a story that I think captures the issue. And by the way, does everyone have handouts at the table? Have those been handed out yet? Okay, perfect. Well, I highly recommend now or at some point giving me your email there, because I'm going to give you a lot of data here. And fortunately, the publisher of my book, the book is not out yet, but they've made the first chapter available for free. So if you just give me your email, you'll be able to get that chapter. So I'm going to go through a lot of data, but every single piece of it is available there. But the reason that I was reminded of that is because that chapter begins with this story. So I'm not going to be able to use this story for very much longer, so I'm going to enjoy telling it right now. And I'm going to ask a question about it, but if you've read it, a couple of you have, do not answer. Right, so this is about, I'm from Southern California. I'm originally from DC metro area, but I live in Southern California. And I was at a farmer's market about 5 years ago in Irvine, California. And I walk up to the farmer's market to get lunch, and perhaps not surprisingly, there is a Greenpeace booth there. And so a girl comes up to me and says, you know, you're an environmentalist, right? And she doesn't wait for an answer, because obviously I'd be an environmentalist if I lived there. And then she says, don't you want to help us end our addiction to fossil fuels and replace them with renewable energy? And I just thought, she has no idea what's about to happen. It's going to be very different than her usual experiences. It's probably, you know, being brushed off or sort of guilty stare or guilty $8 contribution. And so I said, well, no, actually, I write about this issue for a living, and I think what the fossil fuel industry does is great, and I think we should be using more fossil fuels, not less. And I said that because I wanted to start a discussion. I wanted her to bring up no one says we should use more fossil fuels, right? It's even kind of, oh, it should be part of all of the above, or we need it for a while, it's a necessity, we can't use solar and wind yet, but she never heard this view. And so I wanted to bring up, you know, the big kinds of arguments, like, okay, we're gonna run out of it, it's fouling up our environment, and of course, you know, catastrophic global warming or climate change, because I had answers to those things. And so how do you think she responded? Can anyone guess? Okay, you're a jerk. That's a good guess. Others? Outraged. Why? That would have been a really good one. All too rare is the question, why? Come on, keep guessing. Silence? No, that's rare. That did not happen here. That's common at fossil fuel industry conferences when I ask questions. But not among environmentalist protesters. So, come on. What's that? You're killing me. I expected this kind of outrage, or I was hoping for why, but definitely. But she said, you know, name calling, all the usual things, and I'll show you a clip at the end of me at this rally, and you'll just see I'm standing in the middle of 6th Avenue, and there's just this whole march coming against me. And you'll see just what they say to me as I'm standing there. When I'm there, I don't even notice it, but watching it, it's kind of crazy, just retard and just much more offensive things than I like to say on a stage. But no, she said something much worse that I think gets at the heart of what is wrong, the problem that the industry faces, really the problem at the core of every other problem, although it was kind of funny. So I think we should use more fossil fuels, the fossil industry is great, and she says, wow, you must make a lot of money. Says that nobody could possibly say such a thing unless they were being paid off. Today, and the root of this is what I call the moral case against fossil fuels, which is obviously the opposite of my book. So I'm going to talk about the moral case for fossil fuels, what I call the moral case against fossil fuels, rather. The immoral case for fossil fuels, which is what I'm going to argue, that's how the industry responds. And then I'm going to talk about some of the evidence that I think shows, in the end, that there's an incredibly strong moral case for fossil fuels. In fact, fossil fuels are a moral necessity to use, and we should be thinking not in terms of just, do we still use them, but in terms of using many more of them. So I think of you often hear, even by industry, fossil fuel energy presented as an unfortunate necessity. You know, we need it. For now, because there's demand and this kind of thing. And I think of it, no. I think of it as this is a life-enhancing technology. The more, the better. So I'll make good on that, but that's the perspective, and that's an indication of, if you can convince somebody something is a life-enhancing technology, it's a hell of a lot more inspiring than if you say, oh, it's an unfortunate necessity. Because human beings tend to not want unfortunate necessities. They're innovators, and they want to figure out, and rightly so. It's like someone says, well, high mortality rates during birth are an unfortunate necessity of having kids. Well, no, people innovate their way out of that. So if you see coal as just an unfortunate necessity to innovate your way out of, then you're finished. I mean, you have exactly what we have right now, which is coal continuously occupying the moral low ground in every national debate. So I'm going to start with the depressing part and then go to the inspiring part. But actually, if you're really sharp, you'll realize that the depressing part is the more inspiring part, because whenever it's, how should I put this? If you're having a big problem, it's always good news that you're doing worse than you thought in solving it. Right, like think about it. You have a medical ailment and the doctors can't solve it, and it turns out that you hired witch doctors. That's good news, right? Because you can go to a real doctor. Whereas if you already use the best people in the world and the result we're getting is Obama just bashing coal every day, that's a big problem, right? So the more room, I always think the more room for improvement, the more exciting, but it can also affect, it shouldn't, but it can affect self-esteem. Like, well, we were part of this, so we're part of the problem. Yeah, everyone in this room, myself included, has been part of the problem. So we better accept that if we're going to come up with a better solution. So what the Greenpeace story showcases what I call the moral case against fossil fuels. And really this amounts to the concept that President George W. Bush, interestingly enough, really popularized, that it's an addiction. So it's an addiction. So what is an addiction? Addiction is something that it might be beneficial or pleasurable in the short run, but that in the big picture, and especially in the long run, is incredibly destructive. So from my very limited knowledge of heroin users, right, they get some sort of very good feeling and they completely ruin their lives, and they have to get off the addiction, and there's a long withdrawal period and it's painful. And this is the analogy we hear for fossil fuels. And there are three big arguments given. So these are three addiction arguments, and you'll hear these everywhere. So one is catastrophic climate change. When we burn fossil fuels, and in particular when we burn lignite coal, it emits a lot of CO2, and that warms up the atmosphere, and it does it so much and so dramatically and so out of control that everything in the climate is going to go screwy, and the sea levels are going to go up, and it's going to be a catastrophe, and the climate will be literally unlivable. And I don't know if anyone recognizes this guy, but one major figure behind this is James Hansen. He's this very prestigious climate scientist who was a big guy at NASA. And he's said the coal industry should absolutely not exist, and that CEOs of coal companies and other fossil fuel companies should be tried for high crimes against humanity and nature. And this is one of the most respected people in the world. This is Bill McKibben. He's a guy who led that march. I've actually debated him, which you can see on YouTube. He calls the fossil fuel industry public enemy number one. This is John Holdren. This is the president's top science advisor. He also forecasts disaster and says that we need to rapidly get off fossil fuels. So I'll get to pollution in a second, but notice, so what we have here is this addiction, right? We're using it now. We might be getting jobs from it now. We might be getting economic benefits from it now, but it's going to make our planet unlivable. So the idea is morally we can't just keep going in this direction. We're being blind. We're being short-term. And the other thing to notice is that these claims are particularly prestigious because the people who make them often have very seemingly high scientific credentials, and like this many experts agree. So you've got these two dynamics. One is there's an addiction, and the other is, well, the experts tell us there's an addiction, so you better believe it. So this is true also with catastrophic pollution. Particularly this is focused on coal. Coal is giving everyone asthma, it's poisoning everyone through mercury, and look at China, and look at how much soot there already is in the air, and imagine if we keep going, the whole world is going to be like China, and just disaster, disaster, disaster. So again, it's maybe we can manage now, but in the long run, it's going to be a disaster. And then the last one is what's called the catastrophic depletion. So this idea, well, it's a finite resource, it's not a renewable resource, we should be really using things like solar and wind that supposedly last forever. And so sooner or later we're gonna, and they don't usually say how sooner, or they, sooner always telescopes out, which we'll discuss in a second, but sooner or later we're gonna run out of this stuff, it's unsustainable, and what they'll also often say is it's not just coal, oil, and gas, we're using the Earth's resources too flagrantly. And so again, there's a book called The Party's Over. It's like we're having a big party, someone left a bunch of resources for us, and we're just gobbling them up. And so again, in the long run, we're not gonna have a livable world. So does that make sense? I mean, is everyone familiar with these arguments? So this is really important, because every time you talk to somebody who's been educated, particularly in places like where I come from, they have heard these over and over and over. And I was in Utah speaking at the American Coal Council, and a now friend of mine named David Lawson, who works at Norfolk Southern, he said, well, I want to see, I told him that I like convincing normal people in coffee shops and stuff, so he took me down to the city to see if I could do it. And what was interesting is that after I'd given this speech, and what was interesting, the convincing was interesting, but the most interesting thing I think for him was within 45 seconds of starting that conversation, that guy had brought up all 3 addiction arguments, right? So that's in everyone's mind. If we don't know how to deal with those things, and I'm gonna argue first and foremost, getting internally clear on what's wrong with them, you have what you have here. People constantly think we need to be getting off the stuff. And if you tell them that we need it, they always think, well, we gotta find some other way, because we can't just keep staying addicted. So the depletion view, there's a very prestigious guy named Paul Ehrlich, who's a professor at Stanford and is one of the most prestigious ecologists of all time. And he's written articles, he's I think 82 now or so, but last year he wrote a very prominent article in a Royal Society journal saying, look, we're completely running out of resources. We need at least 1.5 planets to justify the amount of consumption that we're doing. So then every addiction, so we've got this addiction, catastrophic climate change, catastrophic pollution, catastrophic depletion. Every addiction needs a cure, right? We need to figure out how to get off it. So the answers are always move toward renewables, get off fossil fuels, and this is really important, no new dirty projects. So this comes up a lot. Say, I work a lot in Canada with the oil sands companies and speaking to those groups. And often they will say, well, we agree that it's, we don't want to use so many fossil fuels and it's kind of an addiction, but we need it. And in my view, and in most people's view, if that's true, you cannot justify new projects. You might say, well, we have to wean ourselves off the old ones, but you can't say, hey, yeah, what we're doing is an addiction and it's leading us to disaster, but let's produce a few more million barrels a day, just for the and wells that'll last a long time. Doesn't make any sense. So the logic of it is we need to get off the stuff, and the idea is if it's catastrophic, if it's truly like we're making the planet unlivable, then it's like a war situation. In a war situation, you're willing to take desperate measures. So if somebody's electricity goes up, even if it doubles, if it's really wartime, if it's that, you're willing to accept that. And that's the argument against you, is that you're causing a catastrophe. And so you need to realize the magnitude of that argument. And that's why they keep winning the moral high ground, because you're deniers. You're pushing away the truth. Yeah, you might be keeping the lights on now, but no one's going to have any lights in the future. Everyone's going to be drowned by the sea level. And one thing you hear, this is a guy named Emery Lovins, you hear that fortunately, the idea is fortunately now we don't really need coal and oil and gas nearly as much, because there are all sorts of state-of-the-art innovations in solar and wind, and we can really just run on renewables if we have the political will and if we commit the resources to it. And this guy is a major supporter of that. The point, so this is just the first point, is that the addiction arguments are a core problem. And you have to, I haven't given the solution yet, but they're a problem. And whenever you communicate, you watch for 2 things. One is, have you accounted for this? And then 2 is, are you reinforcing it? We'll get to that in a second, because a lot of what the industry does is reinforce it. But they have this massive assault. So K through PhD, people are learning that what you do is keeping us addicted. So everyone knows it's a serious problem politically, as in, we all know people who've lost jobs. We know companies that go bankrupt. We understand it's a problem, but it's also, it's not just existential, it's not just political, it's intellectually, they've made an argument that's very, very powerful and supported by a lot of respected people. So that is a difficult thing to deal with. Now, fortunately, it's completely wrong, but I don't think it's well understood why it's completely wrong and how to explain that. And this gets us to what I think is the conventional response, which I call the immoral case for fossil fuels. So one, the environmentalist case can be summed up as fossil fuels are an unnecessary addiction. So there's something that's destroying us in the long run, and we don't need them. I mean, not immediately, but 10, 20, 30 years, we can get rid of the vast majority of them if we have the will, if we have the technology, if we have the commitment. Now, often what the industry response is either doesn't deal with the addiction claim, or will even say, like the CEO of Shell recently was talking about this, no, this is absolutely a catastrophic problem. We need to get off fossil fuels. It's just going to take a long time. So often the view is, yes, it's an addiction, but it's a necessary addiction. So it's and this is what I call the immoral case for fossil fuels. So yes, it's immoral, but we should support it because we need it for some amount of time. And one form in which you see this is, and this has come up today, and I'm saying we have to challenge all of us. So I'll challenge even some of the stuff I saw today. In the focus on economic benefits and jobs and sometimes tax revenue. So it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, it's the common practice to say, like, look, if I came into you as a PR agent and said, okay, I've got a new plan to market the industry. Of course, I'll use all the latest social media, but what I'll say is the government, I'll say that fossil fuels help the economy and we could substitute coal, right? Coal helps the economy, coal creates jobs, coal creates tax revenue, coal is part of our national heritage, and we're lowering our emissions. Anyone recognize that? That sounds pretty standard, right? And it kind of sounds good, like, yeah, those are benefits, right? So why won't that work? And why doesn't it work? It's what everyone has said forever. Is it because we don't know how to use Facebook properly? And I would argue no. So here's how I would do it. We'll switch the example. Let's say instead of a coal PR guy, I'm the PR guy for another addictive substance, allegedly addictive substance, tobacco. So let's say I come into your company and say, look, I'm going to convince the world that tobacco is great. So I'm going to tell them the more tobacco we buy, the more tobacco dollars in the economy, so it'll help our economy. Is that going to be convincing? Or tobacco creates jobs, right? There are lots of people working on tobacco, so the more tobacco we produce, the more tobacco jobs we'll create. Or tobacco, we charge a lot in tobacco taxes, that'll help the national treasury, right? Or tobacco is part of America's national heritage. It certainly is, right? Very much so. Or we're lowering tobacco emissions. Look, low tar cigarettes. So would that work? Would the public be won over by that? Is someone nodding? I've never had anyone nod. Show yourself if you are. Okay, this is a real question. Why wouldn't that work? Or if you think it would, tell me. Tobacco's bad for you. Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. So the idea is that this is harmful to life, right? And particularly in the long term, it's not the first puff, but that as people are smoking. And by the way, I think that tobacco I do not like the way that our culture treats tobacco and singles it out among so many more dangerous things, but nevertheless, I think tobacco and coal are fundamentally different. And I mean, I think coal is fundamentally healthy, and I don't think tobacco is fundamentally healthy. But yeah, they just say, look, it's an addiction. Of course we need economic growth. Of course we need jobs, we need taxes. We want, heritage maybe, but we want to be doing the right thing. We want to be doing something that's actually good for life. So we don't want more of something just because temporarily it's giving us more money, because ultimately it's going to be a large toll in human life. So anytime the industry doesn't address the way that it's viewed, which is as this deadly addiction, if it doesn't know how to address that, then all these arguments just seem evasive. It just seems like, okay, well, yeah, that might be true, but there's got to be another way. And that's why there's always this, well, we got to figure out a way to make solar and wind work. So that is what I call the tobacco problem. And you'll see various degrees. Some companies will try to solve it like BP did with Beyond Petroleum and just say, yeah, we agree, right? We agree, and Chevron even has a campaign called We Agree. Like, we agree that we need a quote-unquote renewable future. But then what are you disagreeing on? All you're disagreeing on is the expiration date of your industry, right? The environmentalists say 20 years and you say 40 years. Okay, fantastic. I mean, and then everyone will say, well, the environmentalists are probably right because they're idealistic and you have a self-interest, and what other industry sets an expiration date on itself? Like, what other industry says, like, we look forward to our competitors winning? So it's interesting. So this is the viewpoint. So the moral case against fossil fuels is being countered by the immoral case for fossil fuels. And I don't think immoral cases deserve to win. Because I think the concept of a necessary evil or a necessary addiction is incoherent. We got to figure out what's best for human life. And if this is really leading to long-term catastrophe, we got to get off it as soon as possible. If it's leading to overall long-term benefit, let alone huge benefit, then we should be embracing it and not at all allowing this kind of thing. Make sense so far? So I like this image. It's like they've got an A-bomb. I mean, they've got a powerful moral argument backed up by many, many prestigious sources. And what I would say is you've got a combination of muskets and cyanide capsules. It's like not really enough to take it on, and then sometimes acknowledging that they're right. I have a slightly related question in the sense that we only have clean water because of coal. Could I get a glass of water? That's actually very relevant to the refutation of it, because most people don't know that. And so here's what's interesting. And you sometimes, thank you very much. We sometimes look back on history and think, how could people have had such wrong views? Like, consensus views in history are insanely wrong, right? I mean, slavery, that is, for a long time, is a consensus view. Right? All kinds, racism is just dominant throughout history. I mean, communism as an ideal, the most murderous ideology in history. Nazism, National Socialism, supported widely, certainly elected by a plurality in Germany, which was supposedly the most sophisticated country in the world back then, and we still trust as the most sophisticated country in the world now, which is a whole other subject. And America's always unsophisticated, even though we bailed them all out, and they would all be dead if it weren't for us. There is a connection in the sense of Americans have much more common sense, and often the sophisticated intellectuals lack common sense and they miss something really big, and that's what I'm getting here. There's something really, really big that's wrong with this addiction thing. It's not like there's one fact. It's completely bizarre. It makes no sense whatsoever. It only makes sense because we've been taught it so many times, and this is the key thing, because we've absorbed the wrong way of thinking that makes us think it's an addiction. It's a wrong way of thinking. And this goes to, why was I there at that New York thing? And really it's because my training was as a philosopher, someone who thinks about how to think about things. And when I was in my mid-20s, I'm 34 now, in case anyone thinks I'm still in my mid-20s, I learned about how valuable energy was, but I also learned, I thought the way we think about it is horrendously wrong, and if we keep thinking about it this way, we're going to make huge mistakes. So that's kind of my thing, is how to think about things, and are we thinking about them logically? No, it's completely illogical. I'll tell you the reason in a minute, but first, I'll tell you one thing that we should always use to give us a hint if something makes no sense. And that is, if we have an idea and someone says an idea and everyone agrees with it, and right, every smart person, you're an idiot, or you're denying it. First of all, if they say that, they're going to be wrong, because nobody with the right view acts like that, right? You just give a clear explanation. Einstein wasn't going around saying you're an idiot if you don't agree with special relativity. He just explained it. I mean, if you couldn't understand it, it might be understandable to him, but you know that. But then the main thing is, if you have an idea, so this idea that's making predictions, well, logical question is, what's the track record of this idea? Have the people making these predictions made predictions before, right? Now, you might think, oh, it's a brand new idea. Nobody has ever speculated that we're going to run out of fossil fuels or that they're going to cause catastrophic pollution or they're going to cause catastrophic climate change. But having studied the history of energy fairly extensively, what's shocking is that 40 years ago, 30 to 40 years ago, all of these same claims, the exact same ones were being made, often by the exact same people. So I'm going to show you, remember all the people I showed you, those prestigious guys? I'm going to show you what they were saying 30 or 40 years ago that they won't own up to today, because it was completely wrong. So what's the track record? So this guy is Amory Lovins, whom I showed you before. He's the solar advocate and a very anti-fossil fuels, said in the late 1970s that we already had twice as much electric power as we would ever need. Does anyone know what's happened to electricity needs since the 70s? Anyone using a device that might rely on that electricity? So let's look at, so the basic prediction is these addictions are going to make the world unlivable. Okay, so let's look at what was predicted. So here's Lovins when he's young. Everyone can read, right? I often read these things and then I kind of remember everyone can read. Okay, so 1976, he's saying this, right? 1976, that's a long time ago. It's 4 years before I was born. This is what actually happened, right? So billions are invested around the world in solar and wind, and every European country wants to be the leader. And what happens? These are, you still can't even, we don't have a small enough typeface to fit solar and wind and biofuels in the, or at least solar and wind in these little spaces. But coal, oil, and natural gas since 1980, I like 1980 since that's the year I was born. So my parents were told, stop using fossil fuels, otherwise it's going to be a disaster, use solar and wind instead. And yet the world chose to use 80% more. Now you might think, okay, well that must have really led to a disaster. And certainly it was predicted that way. So this is Paul Ehrlich. So here's what he said in 1974. So no more cheap, abundant energy, no more cheap, abundant food. Tell that to, I think Ron Ness is sitting back there of the Petroleum Council. Not exactly true. North Dakota has pretty much refuted that single-handedly. And then he said in 29 years, the United Kingdom will simply be a small group of impoverished islands, and he'd take even money that England wouldn't exist. So keep in mind, this is a prestigious guy that we're being told is an expert that we should bow down to. We're not allowed to question him. And he said England wouldn't exist. Anyone been to England to confirm that it exists? All right, I'll trust you. Yeah, so this, and by the way, this is what he looked like back then. So we have the older Ehrlich and the younger Ehrlich. Now, okay, then what actually happened? Well, let's look at what are the places that use the most fossil fuels. China and India increase use by a factor of 5. And people are complaining about, oh, it's going to be a catastrophe. And indeed, they have had quite a bit of air pollution by our modern standards, not by historical standards. But yet their life expectancy goes way, way up, which must mean that overall, especially if we understand what fossil fuels are doing and how important energy is, it's making life much better, and yet it's expected to be a disaster. If someone had said, hey, Paul Ehrlich, should China use 5 times as many fossil fuels? He would say, absolutely not. No, we can't use any more. And yet they have a 6-year increase in life expectancy, as does India. So you've got 2.5 billion people with 6+ increased life expectancies, when everyone said the world is going to be unlivable. So that's a big disconnect. And we're going to see they said that about everything. This is GDP. GDP is per person. It's really important because it's how many resources do you have access to. Now they say money can't buy happiness, but try being super, super poor. I mean, probably some people in here have by American standards. Like, it's not fun at all. And if you're let alone if you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, it's hard to be really joyous. So life has gotten so much better. And then infant mortality is down. Mortality, children under 5 is down. Malnutrition is down. Life expectancy is up. And I'll connect this to coal and energy in a second. But there's a huge correlation. As we're using more of this stuff, it was supposed to lead to a disaster. We used way more than we were supposed to. We were supposed to use less, right? And yet life got much better when we did the wrong thing. And then if you want a historical perspective, this is the amazing one. I mean, look at life until we start emitting a lot of CO2, right? This is the hockey stick, the real hockey stick. Life expectancy jacks up, population. So, I mean, this is an amazing graph. Everyone in every coal company should know these graphs, by the way, the day they come in the company. Someone should explain, this is what you're doing. It's not just you operate this machine, but this machine makes it possible to power every other machine in civilization, which allows us to have clean water and functioning hospitals and everything else good in life, and plentiful food. That is making life amazing. So it's not just that they were wrong, right? It might be, like if life expectancy was going down a bit, and you might say, oh, it's the calm before the storm, but it's exactly wrong, right? They say it's going to get much worse, and it gets much, much better. So if you ever have a series of predictions over decades that are totally wrong, there's almost always something wrong with the way they're thinking about the issue. I don't care where their degree is from. Right? There are all kinds of racists, all kinds of Nazis, all kinds of everything with advanced degrees, right? We don't bow to these things. We don't ignore them. We ask for explanations. And if they're asking us to take it on faith, that's a big clue that they don't have much of an explanation. But there's something wrong with their thinking. And so what is this? So this is really sort of the big fallacy. Well, let me give you an alternative narrative, right, to the fossil fuels that has the same logic as the addiction one. So I'm President Bush or President Obama, and I'm going to give you an argument. Okay, ready? America is addicted to antibiotics. We're addicted, right? We're using them all the time. And yet, we know from scientific studies that antibiotics have side effects. And sometimes the bugs beat out the drugs, right? And therefore, this is an addiction and it's unsustainable and we should stop using antibiotics. And let's switch to green remedies. Let's try holistic things. Let's try natural things. What's wrong with that argument? Why isn't that a good idea? That's a real question. Okay, mortality is going to go down. Why? Makes sense, right? It's got these problems, and therefore we're calling it an addiction. But does anyone see the jump? So there's a jump from has problems to addiction, destruction in the long run. So everything has risks. Everything has challenges. But what they're never too clear on is what is the magnitude of those risks compared to the benefits, right? So with antibiotics, you have in mind, many of us in this room, myself included, would be dead without antibiotics, right? I mean, they're just amazing. So we have that context. We know that they're crucial to life. But with energy, it's not real to most people. I don't think it's real enough to people in the industry. That energy is life in a very real sense. So energy, what is energy? We learn in physics it's the capacity to do work. But really what that means is, I call it, chapter 2 of the book has a discussion. I like calling energy machine calories, because I like thinking of things in terms of calories. So our body has calories, and if we run out of fuel, we die, right? But our bodies are really weak. We can only do so much physical work. That's why, remember that the hockey sticks, right, where it was low, low, low? That's because human beings are so weak, right? Physically, we can't do enough work to grow enough food, to build enough shelter, et cetera. So what we need is machines. But those machines, just like we, need fuel. And the more machines we can fuel, the more work we can have done for us, the higher our standard of living. So every calorie of energy is opportunity. It's the opportunity to make our lives better using machines. So I think if you really get energy, you see it everywhere. And you think of it like money, or even better, where it's opportunity. So somebody can say, oh, you waste energy, like they can say, oh, you waste money. First of all, I would be too careful about telling someone else, they're wasting something, because it's their choice and you don't know their context. But if somebody wastes money, that doesn't mean that there should be less wealth in the world, right? It just means that there are better uses. And just like the guy in the 70s said, oh yeah, I can't think of anything we can use electricity for, so let's ban half of it. Well, other people can. There's no limit to our need for machine calories. There is, as we discover, with sort of obesity issues, there are limits to our need for body calories, right? But there's no limit whatsoever to our need for machine calories. And yet this whole discussion of energy and coal and fossil fuels doesn't take seriously at all the benefits of having more and having them affordable. So it's not just affordable, it's having affordable means you can use more. And more is better. So every time there's the potential to get another calorie of energy, any negative has to be viewed in the context of the opportunity that generates. And then, and of course, in a world where 3 billion people have essentially none, it's just insane that we're talking in these terms. But even for us, I look forward to a world where we use 5 times as much energy, because I think we'd have desalinated water. I think we'd be able to irrigate deserts. I think, who knows what inventions we'll be able to have. So this is really the philosophical point that's the core of my approach, my book's approach, and what I think needs to change is big picture thinking. So with anything in life, we have to look at all the positives and all the negatives. You have to be upfront about both. And this is the key to thinking and the key to communication. And what people are not doing with fossil fuels, in which they don't do with anything else they dislike, like GMOs or pesticides or whatever, they only look at one side. And when you're biased, so that means you have a bias, you have a prejudice. So whenever you have a prejudice, 2 things are always going to happen. One is you're going to miss a lot of positive things, but the other is you're going to have a tendency to magnify the negatives, right? Because the prejudice always cuts both ways. So let's say ethnically I'm Jewish and somebody doesn't like Jews. And let's say I have my share of good and bad qualities. Well, somebody who doesn't like Jews is going to not only any good qualities they have, not only going to diminish them, but let's say, I can be messy. He would probably just completely inflate that and say, this guy's polluting all over the place and dumb, because he'll believe anything because he's prejudiced. So by the way, it's an interesting question, which I can talk about in Q&A, and I talk about in the book at the end about why there's such a prejudice. But there is a prejudice. It's a 100% fact there's a prejudice. You never hear about anyone talking about solar and wind and talk about all of the health hazards of mining the stuff and disposing of the stuff. Never, right? Who hears anyone talk about the coal industry and the rapid increase in clean water around the world and the correlation between those two? You don't even hear the coal industry talk about that barely, right? So there's this complete bias where we only look at one side of one and one side of the other. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is the thing, and it doesn't matter what degree you have. It's a completely illogical way of thinking, and any 10-year-old can tell you that. But you just have to notice it. And the reason we don't notice it is because this happened to me before I really thought about it, we're just taught to define it by the negative. That's just, and often if you want to be better as an industry, you're focused on let's solve our problems. And that's a good proactive attitude, but you can't let people define you by your problems. Those are 2 different things. So it's the machine calories are just so undervalued. And so whenever you're doing these marketing or whatever, you need to show the full spectrum of what it means to be able to afford energy. And so far I've focused on the big picture, like life expectancy and GDP, and I think these are the most important. But it turns out that the case against fossil fuels is far, far weaker than I've implied so far. So I gave you the method that's wrong with it. But it turns out that method isn't just that it ignores that life is overall better, but that our environment is much better, and that can be traced to fossil fuels. So just to give you a sense of how I like to lay it out, the first chapter of my book's called, and this is the thing you can get the first chapter for free just by putting your email, and book's not out yet, it's out November 13th. But like the first chapter is the secret history of fossil fuels, just to show that the quote experts have been wrong. And I talk about fossil fuel energy as the greatest energy technology of all time, and it's important that it's a technology. It takes a lot of ingenuity to do this kind of thing. But then a lot of the book is focused on environmental issues because these are the big ones. And then it turns out that I talk about climate, and I talk about pollution, talk about resources, and it turns out all of those things have gotten much better. And nobody's telling the story. So let's look at climate catastrophe, right? This is the one that we're supposed to be most intimidated on. So remember we had James Hansen who's saying you should be tried for high crimes against humanity. He's making all these scary predictions. Well, it turns out Dr. Hansen has been doing this for a very long time. So this is from 1986. So he's predicting the next 10 years, average global temperatures will rise by 1/2 a degree to 1 degree, and then 2 to 4 degrees. So this is 1986. So this means it would be getting from 2.5 to 5 degrees warmer on average from 1986 to the present. Does anyone know whether that's happened? It's gotten 1.3 degrees warmer from 1850 to the present. Right, so the amount of warming we've actually, so this is the whole lie of these guys agree. Yes, the people who make models agree. I mean, they keep making models, but these models are completely inaccurate. And what's really disturbing is they're never held to account. Like you'll read a story that says the nation's foremost expert on climate prediction. Okay, but maybe the field is just not very good at it. Maybe there's such a thing as a field. Like you could be the foremost expert at building spaceships to go to Alpha Centauri, right? Which nobody can do, and you could be the expert. So nobody, turns out, can model climate very well. But certainly the people who predict these catastrophic things don't happen. So then we've got, so this is what he used to look like, back in the day. So this is what actually has happened. There's been, and this isn't the most important thing, by the way, but it's just important that the predictions have been very wrong. I don't think there's any evidence warming is bad. I think overall warming generally tends to be good. But in any case, there's no dramatic, what we're looking for is not that fossil fuels are problem-free. It's the question of overall, do the benefits far outweigh the risk? And so if we have 1.3 degrees Fahrenheit warming in 150 years, that's just not that dramatic. Now, if someone could show that, it goes up 10 degrees in a decade, that you'd really be concerned. So what we find is that there's not even that strong correlation. In the last 18 years or so, it's been flat. So just complete these, and notice all the predictions are too high, right? Nobody's ever predicting too low. And this is a perfect sign of a prejudice. So here's Bill McKibben in 1989. So it's gotten, a couple of tenths of a degree warmer, right? But he said it will lead us, this is in the next couple decades, if we didn't do what he said, if we didn't restrict fossil fuels, it will lead us, if not straight to hell, then straight to a place with a similar temperature. So he's talking about us frying, a few more decades of ungoverned fossil fuels and we burn up to put it bluntly. So this is the most respected environmentalist in the world. Nobody's holding anyone to account for this. John Holdren, top science guy, he predicted in 1985 that climate-induced famine would kill as many as 1 billion people. This is in a time period when I showed you famine has been on the decline. Thanks in large part to the oil industry, in particular oil and gas industry, we've revolutionized agriculture and brought food to, more food than ever to a population of 7 billion people. It's just 100% wrong. And that's what it used to look like. And so this is, I think, the most important statistic that you've never heard of, because this is climate. Because ultimately, temperature isn't really what matters. It's not like there's some inherently perfect temperature, different geological epochs, temperatures different. Nature doesn't give us an ideal temperature, a stable temperature. But the question is our climate livable or not? Is it a good place for human beings or a bad place? It's really becoming more dangerous. And here's what we see. From 1900 to the present, this is the best data available from a nonpartisan international database. What happens as CO2 emissions goes up? What happens to climate-related deaths? And those are deaths from heat, from cold, from wildfires, from drought, from flood, everything that's supposedly getting worse, right? What's happening to those? Are they going up or down? They're going down. We'll talk about why in a second. But you never hear that. Just to give you context, we've heard last year, we always hear this year is the worst ever, right? It's the worst climate ever, worst drought ever. In terms of recorded deaths from drought in the last 8 years in the United States, can anyone guess how many there's been? 0. I live in California, worst drought ever. I guarantee you a lot of people are dying in previous droughts. My strawberries are slightly more expensive now. That's what's going on. But So there's something really off, and I'll give you another one. So in 1932, with a population maybe 1/3 of the current population, 5 million, I always ask this to kids, 5 million people died from climate-related causes. So how many would you expect died in 2013, the worst year ever for climate? What? 15 million? Well, it's supposed to get much worse, right? So I sometimes ask, like, how many times more people do you think die? You often get 5, 10, 100. So we have 5 million. How many people died? Anyone know? I will give anyone money who hasn't read the book if you anything you want if you know the data. What? 8 people have died from climate in the world? No. That would be really temperate weather. No, but 5 million, okay? So 15 million in the present, and by the way, it should be low because they didn't collect data as well back then, and today they have all sorts of incentives to over-collect, because if you can report more deaths, you can get more money in international aid. So we have 5 million last year, worst year ever, 29,500. That's amazing, right? So what is going on? Well, it's the exact same issue, and I'll be quicker with pollution and resources because it's the same principle. We're not looking at the big picture. So all people look at is, we know CO2 has increased the amount, fossil fuel use has increased the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere all the way from 0.03% to 0.04%. Now, instead of suspecting, okay, that probably has some mild effect, but not that important an effect, people think, oh my gosh, we're changing something, it's fossil fuels, let's look for the most negative scenario possible. So they always try to find these trends of, oh, this is going, sea levels are higher, and I show in the book what the actual ones are. But the more important thing is they don't look at are there any benefits to a livable climate of having more fossil fuels? And common sense should just tell us, and this is where Americans having common sense is good. Yeah, there are a lot. Nature does not give us a safe and stable climate that we make dangerous. It gives us a volatile and dangerous climate that we make safe. Nature does not give us an ideal climate. Everyone who lived before the modern era knew this. Climate was extremely precarious and not nurturing. We have to develop our environment to have a truly livable climate, and that's what energy allows us to do. And so that's why, now you have heating and air conditioning and storm warning systems and sturdy buildings, and we've created, in effect, a man-made climate. And that's what really matters. Technology climate is a problem in any era. Climate change is always a problem, and more energy is always a solution. But they don't look at any of the positive climate-related impacts. And so as a result, in the name of climate, if they deprive third world countries of energy, of fossil fuels, they will be they're so at the mercy of climate. But they claim, oh, I care about, it's not about climate, it's about a bias against fossil fuels. Again, I haven't explained exactly why the bias, but it's 100% true that it's there. So does that make sense? We only look at the negative and never the positive? And nobody has ever seen this data. Nobody even thinks to think of the negative, the positive. So what happens with the pollution and resources is the same thing. So I'll be really quick on these, that Time magazine is predicting in the past deadly pollution, Life magazine, which is unfortunately no longer with us, but they said, all scientists say, in a decade, urban dwellers will have to wear gas masks to survive air pollution. This is 1970. But you have to imagine, you hear all the prestigious sources today, these were the prestigious sources yesterday. In 15 years, air pollution will have reduced the amount of sunlight reaching the Earth by 1/2. That did not happen, by the way. So what actually happened? So this is Paul Ehrlich. Air pollution is going to take hundreds of thousands of lives. So what actually happened to air pollution? Well, probably you know this. We use 25% more fossil fuels, and it's gone down drastically to points where the vast majority of, quote, studies claiming, causality with coal and these airborne things are just wrong. They're statistically invalid, but it's in part because technology. So people aren't looking at, again, they're only looking at, well, if you burn coal, it releases, different nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxide, but they don't look at the technology. But they also don't look at something else, which is even more important. That coal is indispensable for billions of people to clean up our environment. So nature doesn't give us a clean environment that we make dirty. Fundamentally, it gives us a dirty environment that we make clean. Think about drinking water. Environmentalists love clean drinking water? No, they do not. Because if you love clean drinking water, you need to love coal. Not just because it's a good filter, but because water filtration systems are immensely energy intensive. So this is what's happened as fossil fuel use has gone up. The percentage of the population with access to clean water has gone up. So why isn't anyone publicizing this? Again, they're not looking at the big picture. Depletion, the same thing. This is a prestigious organization, the Club of Rome. They predicted that we'd run out by 1993 of gold, mercury, silver, tin, zinc, and lead, as well as oil and natural gas. They're using sophisticated computer models, and this was they had a report called The Limits to Growth in the early 70s, which is incredibly prestigious. Completely wrong. Why? Because they don't understand the positive, which in the case of resources is always human ingenuity. They just think, when they see us burn a lump of coal, all they think of is, oh, you took the coal from nature and you burned it, right? And it's disappeared. But what did they ignore? They ignored that without you, the coal would have no value in the first place. So here's a question. Is coal a valuable natural resource? Raise your hand. Wrong. It's not. It's naturally almost completely useless. Certainly oil is. I mean, oil was considered the most useless substance of all time for a long time, because without human ingenuity, it's just a rock, right? You're the ones who figure out, or James Watt, at the root of it, but you're the ones who continue to figure out how to use a rock to build and charge an iPhone. Like, that's not, nature doesn't give us coal electricity. It's a product of human ingenuity. So whenever you think about our future resources, you have to think not just of what we'll consume, but of what we'll produce. And so what we found is that the fossil fuel industry has gotten amazing at producing new resources. So here's oil, right? So consumption goes up, and yet reserves keep going up. And we know that there's more than 10 times more oil in place in the world than there are reserves, and it's just going to be a question of technology and human ingenuity. So resources, this is a concept from the book, resources are created. We turn non-resources into resources through human ingenuity. They're not taken. Nature gives us very few usable resources. So nature neither gives us a safe environment nor ample resources. We have to create both of those, and we can only use those using machines, which means we can only do that using energy. And the more we have, the better, and any negatives have to be viewed in that context. This is really, then, I think, everything gets changed once you think big picture. And it's big picture always, what's the big picture for human life? You have to watch out, because a lot of people care about mosquitoes more than they care about human beings. They certainly care about polar bears more than they care about human beings. But I'm talking about human beings. Those are the things that's what matters to me. I am a human being. And so I think of this as what needs to change then is in the industry and outside the industry. So, I speak both to the industry and to the general public, but I'm always trying to do the same thing, which is give people what I call a big picture, human-centered understanding of the fossil fuels. So those are the keys. Big picture, human-centered. And so that involves a lot of facts. So in my talks, I give a lot of facts, and in my book, I certainly have a lot of facts. But the most important thing is the framework, is the way of thinking about it, is positioning it big picture, because that will make it much clearer in your mind, in your employees' minds, in your kids' minds, in the minds of anyone you communicate, if you understand how to frame these issues, versus getting sucked into the addiction perspective, which is negatives all out of context. So again, A-bombs with muskets, no need. So I consider the moral case for fossil fuels, which is really a way of thinking, as your H-bomb, like that, and as my H-bomb in terms of fighting for civilization. Because if you think about them this way, and you put all the facts together, you do all the research, and you know them all, you will have such clarity, and you'll be happy to go out on the streets in New York and have 100,000 people yelling at you. It will not matter, because you'll know that you're right, and people will become drawn to that, and it affects everything. It affects communications campaigns, advertisements, videos, but it's all the perspective. And so my goal in I've been doing this for a while now, my goal in putting together the book was that I thought there needed to, first of all, Penguin, which is one of the major publishers, offered to let me write this book and pay for it, which I thought a liberal publisher would never do that. So I was like, all right, well, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing to actually get to write about the moral case for fossil fuels, and get it broadcast everywhere. But more than that, I didn't know of any resource that really took the big picture approach, and I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary for everyone in the general public, but particularly young people. I wish I had gotten this, so I kind of just write whatever wish I had gotten. And I think really in the industry, that everyone in the industry, if we talk about ambassadors or standing up, the core thing that you need is the big picture human-centered education in what you do. And it's just, I can speak from experience, it's so empowering. So again, I hope you put down your email. At the bottom, if you're already excited enough, you're more than welcome to express interest, and we're not exchanging any money or anything, but express interest in either getting books for your company or for students. We have lots and lots of college professors, and this is really exciting to me because I wish I had gotten this material. College professors who are requesting the books, and we have companies and individuals, even outside the industry, who like these arguments, who are funding them. So if you're interested in taking part in that, you can write that down. But for sure, give your email, because chapter 1 alone, I want you to read it, and I want you to tell me what you think, and I want you to start using the arguments, and you can share with anyone and see how it goes, because coal is the frontier. Like coal is, and in this book, I use more coal examples than anything else. A, because coal is arguably the most important technology of the future, just worldwide, but B, because this is really where the environmentalists have confused people the most. And so I tell people, if you don't know how to argue for coal, you don't know how to argue for energy. And this is the EPA battle, so this is a battle I very much want to be involved in. I hope I can help in the future, and I hope that this has helped today. So thank you very much for having me.